This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey Matt, it's a bit of a windy night out, so hopefully there's not much interference on this note. It's just starting to drizzle a tiny bit. I'm out in shorts and a t-shirt at coming up on 11 p.m. So hopefully it doesn't start pouring down. Everyone's asleep at home, so kind of have to get out of the house to send this voice note. Another night with Mammy, another kind of reliable genre flick. Watched Single White Female tonight, which I missed when it came out. I was too young, released in 92. So I would have been 6 years old. And when I sort of got into movies, it was definitely a movie that I heard mentioned a lot, just the name of it. Didn't really know much about it. Kind of got the rough impression of what genre it was in. Sort of that erotic thriller / psychological thriller that was very big in the late 80s, early 90s. And yeah, just never caught it, never really bothered to look it up. I guess I watched some of the bigger films from that type of film, like Basic Instinct, or some of the smaller films like Jagged Edge. This one, yeah, it's halfway between the erotic thriller and the sort of psychological suspense thriller of the likes of Psycho and stuff. And it was a bit of a impulse decision tonight. I just like, you know what? This is probably just reliable fare. And it is. Although my mother did find it pretty unnerving, like it got under skin. She's quite susceptible to psychological suspense stuff and let out this pretty big yelps and was covering her eyes whenever there was any gruesome bit, which was good for me because it was like, you kind of want that, you get that, so sort of vicarious thrills when someone else in the room is really, it is the perfect audience. Like imagine like the director of this film watching it in a test screening, he wants to see that. Speaking of which, the director, Iranian, I believe, wasn't familiar with his name. Checked out his IMDb. I saw that he directed Murder by Numbers, which I remember renting on DVD when it came out. Oh, it's starting to rain now. I have to retreat back home. Yeah, Murder by Numbers. I remember that being an early Ryan Gosling movie, and it was the movie that I saw that was made me kind of go, this Ryan Gosling guy is going to be huge. And then he just sort of wasn't huge for at least another decade, and then became huge. Probably getting some wind interference here now. This one, yeah, really liked it. At one point I thought to myself, and you're not a drinking man, so I could perhaps pick a better analogy, but when it's a hot day and you've been working or you've been stressed and you just you need a release, and you get an ice cold bottle of a basic lager like a Budweiser or something, and there's nothing too interesting or subtle about it. You don't need a developed palate to appreciate it. It's not complex. It's not taxing on your mind. It's just the perfect thing for what it is. And you're coming to it with exactly the right expectations and exactly the right moment. And it goes down so well. That's what I felt for a lot of this movie. Now, I'm specifically talking about before the killings start. I think this film is at its best before the killings start. Once the killings start, I like the movie a lot, but the subtle building of suspense, building of the character in Jennifer Jason Leigh, who, might I add, is fantastic in the film. That's when the film really sings. And once it becomes more of a sort of like physical thriller rather than like a suspense psychological thriller, once it becomes like, how are we going to actually escape a killer, then it's just a good flick. I mean, I got really no complaints about it, but that's less special, I suppose, because it's not relying on like really, really well cast parts. It struck me that this must be one of the few suspense thrillers where both leads are female, the protagonist and antagonist. Big Hitchcock vibes in it, but also big 90s vibes. I think you and me are both suckers for anything 90s. I was thinking there, this must be one of the last movies that's a sort of, I don't know, like a movie about cosmopolitan, wealthy New York, young, attractive people that has no cell phone communication whatsoever. They don't even have pagers, released in 1992. And watching it, I'm reminded of how big a part communication and telephones play in all these movies, going right back to Hitchcock. At this film, we do get a little bit of attempted email or internet correspondence at the end, which is cut short. But yeah, it's kind of nice seeing that, like, movies right before a change would happen. And also, I just think in a more meta context, the 90s do sort of represent the end of the celluloid era. Of course, they still make films, like shoot films on film, but there's just an extra care that a film like this would have got back then compared to what it would get now, unless it was in the hands of like a real kind of auteur, acclaimed director. But this is a schlockmeister, although he directed Barfly, which has a good reputation. I haven't seen it, but by and large, this film it's kind of like a cheap and dirty exploitation genre film. Yet we get like, really well crafted atmosphere and really good acting. I mean, I think you and I both agree that good acting doesn't mean that you're getting Pacino or Day-Lewis. Like, good acting captures what acting was required for this movie. What was the appropriate way to act in this film? And I think the two leads just do a fantastic job. This movie, without those two actresses, would be nothing. Like, it would just have absolutely no potency whatsoever. I love all the tropes we get here. I love that sort of like some kind of weird off-kilter person works their way into your life, and there's little red flags, but also, who isn't a little bit kooky and a little bit weird and can all be explained away. And certainly Bridget Fonda is in a very vulnerable place and maybe receptive to a distraction. It so naturally earns the net that she finds herself wrapped up in. It has another of my favorite tropes, which is they've done this before, which is like the backbone of the film, the stepfather, and happens to get out, and pop that thing of like, you're just like that girl in Tampa. She called my mom too, and like, the thing though that is missing from this film is more of an eventual expose of the twisted background of Jennifer Jason Leigh. And I say this all just forgetting about this sort of the PC like, is it okay to exploit mental health issues as like a antagonist, scary, creepy, weird thing in movies? Just let's bracket that for a minute. I want from this movie an admission of Jennifer Jason Leigh killing her twin sister, and I want it to come out that she has been trying to regenerate that twin in all these other women, and then they haven't lived up to it, so she's killed them too or something. I just want a bit more. It doesn't have to be exactly that. It doesn't have to be wrapped up with a ribbon. But I think the film stops short of giving me some really fucking dark, twisted background of Jennifer Jason Leigh. And everything we get from her parents, the very, very brief appearance of her parents over the phone, they seem like a healthy, loving, good parents. So there's you don't quite get the oh man, you thought you were just letting some nice young lady to be your roommate, but this girl is the universe that she comes from is fucking twisted and dark. Like, I just wanted a little bit more creepiness there, because the creepiness that Jennifer Jason Leigh brings to the movie is impeccable. I mean, she could have played this so badly, like if she tried to overact the creepiness right from the beginning. But she really, really humanizes this character. She does such a good job that I can scarcely even imagine how inhumane this character may be on the page without her acting interpretation of it. But she definitely she brings a lot to the fold. Yeah, it ticks along really nicely. It's certainly got a lot of predictable stuff, like a lot of foreshadowing the conversation being heard through the air vents and stuff like that. But because it's a film that you kind of want to go where it will obviously go, you don't really mind it being predictable, or at least I didn't. By that I mean, when you're watching a action movie and it sets up that like there's a really big tough guy in this part of the building that the hero's gonna have to go through, or it's a horror movie where it sets up that the phone doesn't always work or reception cuts out in this area, you go, yeah, thank you for putting that in. I know you're laying a nice solid foundation for me to enjoy the movie, or at least that's how I tend to go with these things. So the predictable nature of it is perfectly fine. Again, it's because it's just so deliciously played out in terms of the acting, and you kind of just know that it's going to escalate and escalate. There is obviously another version of this movie where she doesn't go on a killing spree, and it's more realistic, and she definitely crosses lines, but it doesn't go so over the top, and it's maybe a bit more. Maybe we'll get under your skin more if it was a bit more subtle. But this is great fun. The early stuff though is the best, like the haircut. I don't know, I just wanted more from like the shoebox full of cutouts and stuff. I wanted to they build that up in a way that when she finally gets her hands in it and she starts reading through it, I want that to be a bit where she's like gasping, holding her hand over her mouth, like, holy fucking shit. And it's not really that. Also, like the kind of S&M club that we go to, it's like, okay, she's pretending to be Alison kind of and going out to this, but it feels like there's another level that this film could have found. Like, when you watch Barbarian, for example, that thing of like, oh shit, we're going up a level here. We're going to a new place. Maybe the Korean version of this movie would have done that. But yeah, as is, really fun, solid 90s, like very 90s, obviously. It's got that song, is it Enigma that did that? Like, I'm not sure of the artist, but that song that's playing in the nightclub of all the like Gregorian monks or whatever with the dance music, very iconic. and Steven Weber. Do you remember that sitcom that he had, Weber, I think it's called? Just a bunch of 90s artifacts. I mean, even Bridget Fonda herself is kind of a 90s artifact. Not sure if I've seen her in anything since Jackie Brown. Jennifer Jason Leigh obviously had massive comeback with The Hateful Eight, but it's definitely associated with the 80s and the 90s. And I'm glad to have caught up with this one. So, been on a bit of a run lately of like either revisiting or just visiting for the first time early 90s stuff, and always really satisfying when you can hear in a movie referenced forever. I mean, it's like one of the main icons of obsession movies, and then we'll watch it and you actually enjoy it and really like it. Not a hard movie to kind of enjoy. So yeah, good flick. Let me know what you thought of it, and yeah, what other movies do you like in this world? I think The Gift is a different thing in a way, but The Gift is another great who's this creepy motherfucker working their way into my life movie. Just walking to work here now. A couple of stray observations just popping into my head about the movie last night. We've been on a real nice run of Stephen Tobolowsky, recently watching Sneakers. Sneakers being more the Tobolowsky that we know and love, that kind of loser, meek, nerdy guy. This is obviously, he's still a loser and nerdy and everything, but it's nice to see a darker, more sinister twist on the Tobolowsky persona. Really appreciated that. Another thing that I thought was fantastic was, I mean, everything that Jennifer Jason Leigh does is so beautiful in its in it, how calculated it is and how sort of expertly she carries it off. She manages to portray the character as someone who's unhinged, out of control, messes up sometimes, but is also super smart in her conniving, calculated ways. And one of the little moments that I think works for me so much better than some of the more dramatic, high energy, murdery moments is just that bit where she's either pretending to or genuinely crying, but clearly trying to get close to Ali's fiance, and they embrace, and you know what she's trying to do. Like, you know that it's like she's trying to coax him in, she's trying to get her to hug him. She's probably going to then start kissing him, but just the actual way it's blocked and choreographed, like that whole movement that eventually ends with like just her hand disappearing behind the door, touching his hand, closing the handle of the door. That moment, like that, where she basically gets him to sort of make a move slightly, or at least turn his head, and then sort of ducks off away, just planting the seed, but not taking it to the next level. And, you know, a lesser movie would just have that be like a sexy seduction scene. But the fact that it's a sort of seduction moment that's wrapped up in like tears and sorrow and mental health and everything is kind of probably the peak of the movie for me, that bit. Other things might come to my head. I was quite tired last night when I was sending the voice note, but it is peppered with just great little character beats. Just even like line reads. Jennifer Jason Leigh, exactly the way she says things, the expression on her face is always showing so much of the character. So yeah, she was the highlight of the movie for me. I'd like to revisit Fatal Attraction, because that's a similar movie in terms of being like a very iconic villain that's an obsessive person that you kind of make the mistake of letting into your life. I mean, in the case of Fatal Attraction, it's like there's this argument of like, does he deserve it because he let Glenn Close into his life in a sinful way or whatever, whereas this is just like, oh, I just want a roommate, for God's sake. But Glenn Close, with the bunny boiling and everything, became maybe the ultimate icon of this type of character. And I think she might have won Best Actress or Best Supporting Actress, I'm not sure, but I'd be interested to see upon revisit if I think that she does a better job than Jennifer Jason Leigh, because I think Jason Leigh just absolutely smashes it.
You know, if I just go by the audio story of your first voice note and your second voice note, in the first one, it sounds like you're out in a big windy storm. And in the second one, it sounds like it's after the storm and you've washed up on a beach surrounded by seagulls. So, nice bit of audio storytelling there. I don't know how much will be left in it once I fucking clean up the wind out of it, but yeah, it's quite funny. And do you know what else is funny? When your mom comes to stay, you always message me with just a list of movies that you can watch with your mom. And one of the requirements you always say is, or make sure there's no sex scenes, not because she can't handle it, but because you can't handle watching it with her. It's like that old thing, isn't it, when you're a kid and a sex scene comes on, or at least a teenager. And if that sex scene came on when you're a teenager, it'd be like, oh yeah, gonna get to see some titties. But if your parents are in the room, a 30-second sex scene might as well be 30 hours. And you do the old hand blocking off your face and just hoping that this scene will end soon. This needs to end. I need to look not bothered by it, but I also need to look not like I'm enjoying it. Yeah, I recently had my parents tell me they were enjoying Euphoria, talking about where everyone's having mad sex and that, and you get to see penises, which my dad had no problem telling me. Yeah, but all that to say that single white female was quite the risky choice. I think female masturbation and blowjobs and talking about common someone's mouth was pretty up there, man. Ugh. Sorry, that's my own little joy of that unfortunate situation. Just imagining you squirming. I will say, I wasn't as enamored with this movie as you seem to be. However, I did quite enjoy the psychological side of it very much. Like you said, it is very Hitchcockian. It is very psycho. And like you also said, it is not very often we get a psychological thriller, in fact, a psychological erotic thriller from the golden age of erotic thrillers, apparently. Imagine that as a thought. That is about two female characters. And I think the psychology of that and the breakdown of that and finding horror in some truths of female relationships, I thought was pretty damn clever. Obviously, I'm a man and this is an outsider perspective, so this is based on what I've interpreted, based on what I've encountered as a man, and based on what I've been told by women as a man. But again, it's purely an outsider's perspective ultimately. But there's something to female friendships that's very different to male friendships, and I'm talking very generally here. And that's that level of intimacy and that level of in each other's space, both physically and personally, that you don't get in the same way in a male friendship. And again, I'm not saying you don't and it doesn't exist, but that is generally the case. And the females I've observed, it's very touchy, it's very, you know, huggy, kissy. You know, when we have our once a year meet up, and we've known each other for fucking, I think, well over 20 years at this point, that goodbye half hug handshake that we do sums up a lot of male friendships. And I don't think we've even got a picture together in that time. Maybe that picture of the school fucking, I don't know what it was. We didn't go to prom, but whatever it was, anyway, something got to do with school. We were both trying to dress trendily like magicians. But yeah, I like where this goes with female friendships in terms of it takes that closeness and it takes that borrowing clothes and borrowing dresses and putting on perfume and, you know, changing together and being naked, like topless. I like the way it takes those elements of female friendship that are evidently there and it builds something around it that's sinister. What if she's not just taking your dress? What if she doesn't just want to smell like you? What if she isn't platonically touching you? What if she isn't platonically looking at you while you're topless? All these elements are put into this in a very sinister way at times, but also in a way that you're not quite sure if it would be that. And a woman could get into this situation without realizing it. And I do agree with you that Bridget Fonda and especially Jennifer Jason Leigh, or Lee, whichever, are very good in this. And they make that movie in many ways. And I also like the other psychological element that I've observed when in relationships. I'm trying to I'll try and make this point without throwing anyone under the bus. Not that we get any listeners, but I've been in relationships where I've been with that person and there's a certain hostile element from friends of people I've been in relationships with where it seems protective. It could be envy. It could be jealousy. It could be that they're lonely themselves and resent what they have or what I've had, should I say, and what they don't have. And it's almost bordering on like a jealous ex, but it's only been based in purely platonicness, and I was seen as a rival to something that they're not even in the league to be a part of. And that's sometimes toxicity of female relationships when one person gets into a relationship and maybe some of the friends are not in that place. That's my observation throughout my life. And what I really like is obviously the title is Single White Female. We get that with the Jennifer Jason Leigh's character, but because it's established that her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend is a bit of a scumbag anyway because he cheats on her, her protectiveness and her almost going to bat for her friend seems quite normal and seems from a good place because it's been established that he's actually a bit of a dickhead. So again, that's another element of it, those traits that are very unnecessary and can go a bit off kilter if too far in female relationships. It's meshed into this very well to slowly organically grow, just like the character does. And before you know it, she's dressed like you. She's got the same haircut as you. She's almost wanting to be you and taking your identity. And that also ties into the identity that female friends have together sometimes when they're both single. So there's all these undercurrents of the psychology of female relationships to this that I really thought was well done. Again, that's a completely outsider's perspective, so take with it what you will. What else? Yeah, I really like how it's presented early on when she's going about the flatmate recruiting. Can you imagine there was a time where it was probably all right to take a Polaroid of your potential flatmates as part of the interview process? Nowadays, it would be a red flag not to live with that person. And just the organic nature, how Jennifer Jason Leigh's character appears when Bridget Fonda's breaking down and crying, and how they do have a connection to begin with. And do you know what I liked as well? You also mentioned, yeah, put the mental health side of things, and if that's okay to exploit, to the side for a minute. I mean, personally, I don't even view movies like that. I feel like if I'm watching an action movie and there's guns in it, I know this isn't a commentary about guns. I know they're using it as a tool to give me action. So it would be detrimental to my viewing experience and almost counterproductive to the movie to view it on those terms if it's not being used. It's not that it's not valid criticisms. It's just I'm not trying to have a criticism of something that is a passive of the movie rather than an aim of the movie or a theme of the movie. Yeah, just how she's presented and how Jennifer Jason Leigh plays her is very good because how she presents herself is not devious but reactive and emotional. However, when you break down what she does, it is very devious at times. And it is very premeditated. And it is very planned, especially when we find out that this has happened before. You said you needed a scene where Jess goes fucking crazy and oh, she's done this before, she's taken identities, blah, 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 blah. I actually like that this felt more like the beginning of the worst part of that pathology. That was the perfect storm of having a connection with somebody when they're vulnerable. And this is the first time she managed to successfully hide how fucked up she was from the beginning to get to a part where she could ingrain herself in that character's life. So I felt like this was the first quote unquote success, if you will, of that. And that is why we got the worst version of things that could happen. I did have a problem when it gets to the killing, as you put it. I felt the director, Barbet Schroeder, had a very dull eye how to shoot things and block things when it comes to the action and the murder. Now, I thought the vehicle is, sorry, not the vehicle, the building itself as a character and a backdrop to the movie and how old it looked, the elevator, the vents, the hallways, the lighting. I thought the building was a very good setting. I 100% agree that the scene where she's trying to seduce the deadbeat boyfriend, Jennifer Jason Leigh that is, and her hand lingers in a way, and that's a very creepy scene. I thought that was very well blocked. But for the action and everything that happened in that way, like, oh, hit someone with a poker. And, okay, that looked really dull. And all the action-based conflict, like when she knocks out the neighbor, when she hits the guy in the eye with the stiletto, I thought that was just... When it gets to the time when it's meant to ratchet up and now it's meant to get nail biting, now it's meant to get thrilling, now we're meant to be really, oh shit, and maybe you felt that because your man was watching it on the edge of her seat. I can assure you that I did not feel that when it got to that point, and I thought it was very televisual at that point, very unimaginative. Even how Bridget Fonda fucking hangs upside down and stabs Jennifer Jason Leigh's character with a, I don't know, something she took from the elevator. First of all, how she took it from the elevator was blocked very badly as well. There's a way to do that well, and there's a way to do it not well, and that's one of it. And then how she just hang down from the bar, and here it's very 70s Western TV show punch-up style. I guess that's the best way of putting it. It's very uninspired, and I felt once it started getting to that part, it dragged a lot, and I think he nailed the psychology side of it. The actors nailed the assignment. I felt it started to really drag, and just how the execution of everything after it ratcheted up, it didn't feel like it ratcheted up. It felt like it took a nosedive to pretty Days of Our Lives at that point. Not that I've ever seen that soap, but that's what I imagine it would be. A few other things. It's not often we get a depiction of male sexual assault, and that was pretty shocking. I thought the scene where we got to see the dog fall down and be found like that was pretty shocking as well. So the movie does have some very good horror moments that are outside the norm. And yeah, regarding the male sexual assault, how that scene is done is very good as well, because you can't really, I mean, you can, but you can't really sexual assault men in the same way that you can women. I mean, woman to man relations, that is. And how this is done, you can see the psychological turmoil on his face, because first of all, he thinks it's Bridget Fonda when Jennifer Jason Leigh sneaks into the bed and she starts kissing him and sucking him off. And then he doesn't really realize it. And then he does realize it at the last second, but she's gripped his dick and makes him come. And there's that kind of confusing moment of, well, I'm about to nut. At least that's how it's played. He's caught in the moment of to nut, but he can't really get out of it anyway. So there's that confusion of that not joy, but at the same time, the horror and the embarrassment and the power being taken from him, and then having to deal with that. Obviously, he doesn't live very long after that, but I thought the actor, who was pretty wooden up to that point, did an actual good job in that bed scene. And when he turns over and he's vulnerable to to deal with the ramifications of that and tried to work it through his head. Thought that was very well done. You don't see that very often. So there is a lot of good to this movie, but I just felt that when it gets to the final third, and maybe it's even slightly more than the final third, I thought that was the weakest part of the movie, and I started to really lose my interest big time.
Hey, Matt. Yeah, I definitely enjoy this movie a lot more than you. I do sort of broadly agree with the strengths and weaknesses of the film, but where the film seemed to be sort of like really falling apart for you, in the end, I was still like thoroughly enjoying it. And then for the first 2/3 of the movie, I was like really loving it. But as I said, it's kind of like it's such a well, from in my opinion, it's really doing what it's trying to do. So not just so well, but so exclusively. It's only doing that. It's got nothing more up its sleeve than the movie that it is. And so if you want that, like if you really just want that, then it just hits the sweet spot. You referenced action movies in your voice note there. I mean, there's certainly plenty of action movies, plenty of slashers, where it's like, this ain't got nothing to give me other than that thing. And I think it does that thing really well personally. But yeah, obviously it's subjective at the end of the day. What you're saying about like watching it with my mom and the sex scenes and stuff, even though this, I'd imagine got greenlit because of the erotic thriller boom. And certainly you wouldn't be surprised to see this on lists of erotic thrillers, like, kind of lazily made lists of just like lumping everything into one go. I don't think of this as an erotic thriller at all. There's lots of nudity, which is definitely there for titillation and is definitely there because of the era that the film was released in, where that was what was making the big bucks. And it's trying to align itself with that in a way, but almost all of the nudity happens outside of sex scenes. I don't know, it's just not a sexy movie at all. Like, by the time we get to the first really involved sex scene, and by involved I mean like actually being like a major scene where stuff happens, it's not supposed to be sexy at all. It's supposed to be really sinister. I mean, maybe it is supposed to be sexy, I don't know, but it certainly is. Yeah, I don't think of it. It wasn't really an awkward movie to watch with my mother. One or two scenes, I mean, she does like the blowjob scene, I guess is probably the most extreme, but it's fleeting. It's not like we're watching Basic Instinct or something where like the whole point of watching the movie is like how sexy it is and how sexy the sex is and everything. It's not that. What you said about the way that it plays upon this phenomena that you and I have only observed as outsiders of how close female friendships are, how involved they are, how physically and emotionally entangled they get with one another, and like literally like wearing each other's clothes and all this, everything, sleeping in the same bed a lot of time. You can imagine like in female roommates. It is interesting. I don't know how well it works for a female audience, but certainly for us, it's directed by a man. I don't know if it's written by a man, but certainly for me anyway, it worked well, sort of allowing that to be the bedrock of a dark, twisted, sinister psychological drama. And I can't think of, I mean, I guess there's like Black Swan. There's a few movies out there that are like, protagonist woman, and then who's this other dark presence woman that's getting involved with her. But there's not that many. And like, it probably isn't that many movies about two women that aren't like comedies. Like, you got things like Bottoms or Booksmart and stuff, where it's like, okay, well, this is more of a sort of relationship comedy or whatever. But in terms of genre films, like, and by that I mean like more thriller, horror, crime, whatever, suspense, I can't really think of many. So that's novel to see, and as we, I think, both agree that the actors were well cast in this. you mentioned there how, because she's introduced, like the two characters meet at a point where Bridget Fonda is really in the pits because she's been cheated on, and her like amazing relationship with her fiance has broken up. And then Jennifer Jason Leigh is protective of her, and it kind of feels like warranted. There's that thing of like, and I guess it happens in a lot of movies where you don't know whether you can trust someone or not. It's like you can kind of buy their reasoning. I think this film does that amazingly well. I don't think that that's like some genius novel idea that this film came up with. I think it's quite commonplace in films about like a potentially sinister person or sinister presence coming into your life. And there's millions of them. Like The Guest is one that comes to mind. But I think a lot of the time when I see them doing, like, I see them sort of walking this line of like being trusted or not trusted by the main characters, a lot of the time I'm either like, oh, Jesus, come on, wake up and smell the coffee. Like, this person's clearly a fucking psycho. Or I'm like, well, there isn't really any tension here because they just don't know that any bad shit that this person's doing is off screen. It's like not in their presence. So there isn't really any like, is it slowly dawning on them? In this one, it's like, I think, again, because of the acting, it's very delicately teased out. And for a lot of the movie, Bridget Fonda thinks that Jennifer Jason Leigh is just like a bit of a wacky character almost, like a bit. And, we've certainly all been around wacky characters, and some might even argue that I am a wacky character. I don't know what people would say about me, but people are different. People are complicated. People are, people pose a challenge to each other in terms of occupying the same space as roommates or coworkers or in a relationship, whatever. And when you're getting to know someone, you don't necessarily know like what's just a red flag, but not actually, they are, bad news. And what is, okay, that's a smoking gun. That's it. Like, they're just fucking nice. I need to distance myself from this person. And I think, yeah, Jennifer Jason Leigh manages to sort of reel back a lot of stuff with her acting and her reaction. And it actually makes me ask the question of how bad is she? Like, is she, and this is, you mentioned how you can kind of bracket the real world questions about mental health and the potentially exploitative nature of these kind of films, because you're going, look, this is a movie. I'm here to have fun. I'm here to be entertained. It's not a fucking documentary about someone struggling with mental health. This is a thriller to be suspenseful and entertaining. So, I only need to take it on those grounds. But I guess for me, the film, and not all films of this type would be like this, like that. There's plenty of opportunities to make a film like this where you don't in any way realistically depict the mental health issues, and you just make the person scary, and that could be a great movie. But in the case of this film, because we get so much screen time with Jennifer Jason Leigh, and we get her, at the beginning when she comes, and she, they have the thing with the broken faucet and the drying out clothes and then hanging out together. I kind of get the impression that this girl, although she's got a screw loose and she's ultimately going to stop at nothing to get what she wants, including murder, she is sincere at the beginning of the movie. She's not coming to con Bridget Fonda, right? She's not walking through the door going, this is going to end with me killing everyone, and that's what I do. Like, it's not that. She's not that level of like serial killer type character. She's more someone who is lost in the world and really looking for the answers in other people, and clearly with this twin complex thing, looking for the female companionship. And I think that's not to say that puts an obligation on the audience to consider this in real world terms, in terms of the psychological implications, whatever. But for me, personally, as an audience member, I find that really interesting to navigate. And it certainly makes me somewhat sympathetic of her. I still think the film works very well with her as just taken as an antagonistic character, and ultimately she's the baddie, and you got to escape her, and you got to kill her, and all that kind of stuff. And I got no problem with the film sort of devolving into that, but I think there is a lot of texture here, again, mainly because of the acting, that kept me really engaged. I was tracking that, I was following it, and again, it leaves you with questions to ask at the end about who was this girl? Where was she coming from? When we saw her being nice early in the film, is that just because she's a nice person, or is every positive gesture and moment that we've encountered with her some sort of attempt to mask her true nature, like deliberate misdirection? And I think the film is all the better for that ambiguity and that depth, personally, because that's not a given. I mean, it could be that, like, come on, I just want to get to the action. I want to get to the thing. Why are you bringing in other commentary or whatever? But in this case, I think that works pretty well. The stuff you said about how, like, you felt that the blocking and the general structure of the action scenes, quote unquote, or the killing, murder, thriller scenes at the end, the more kinetic part of the movie, was weak from a directing perspective. I didn't feel that. Could have been a case of, like, the more engaged you are at the movie, the more sort of thrilled you are or scared you are of the prospect of something bad happening to the character. But it worked for me. Like, the various kind of cutaways and then reveal of the new situation, Bridget Fonda all tied up and taped up in a chair. It's all, really foreshadowed the that screwdriver is coming back into it. But there's many scenes of someone trying to do something, and Jennifer Jason Leigh is getting closer, whether it's putting up the volume on the television or writing the email or whatever it might be. There's a lot of scenes that are like physical, spatial, suspense storytelling, and I'm certainly not going to say that it's some sort of masterwork of that. This isn't a Wes Craven movie, but I thought it was decent, and I was actually kind of surprised to see that the director has had basically no. Well, he did direct Barfly, which again I haven't seen, and I've heard good things about. So maybe I should watch that before speaking ill of him. But yeah, he seems to have pretty much disappeared, or it's not even disappeared. He never was a known name, to my knowledge. Maybe for a few months after this film came out. It does get a bit ridiculous at the end. Bridget Fonda swinging down from the ceiling with I guess it's the screwdriver or something. Like, I buy that she's fit enough to do that. I buy that, like, her body type and everything, her physique could get her up into that vent and could get her swinging down. I just don't buy that she does that. I buy more that she cowers in that vent, and that's kind of it. Yeah, it's a bit much. That it's a bit stupid. It's a bit ridiculous that specific move. I mean, it accounts for probably less than 2 seconds of the runtime of the movie, but that was a bit where I was like, really though? I guess her getting up in the vent, I buy more, because where else are you going to go? I mean, it probably you or I would try that. I don't know if I'd fit, but given no other choices, you're going to try and get away to somewhere. And the thing that I kept on coming back to as, like, sort of just a pretty hilarious addition to the movie is the fact that there's a massive incinerator in the bottom of the building. Like, I guess that must be some sort of old New York building thing. Like, how do you get rid of your furniture? We just bring it down to the old incinerator. And I know it's supposed to be like an old building, but maybe I'm just missing some little piece of New York historical context, because for me, I was like, this is very gothic. Like, this doesn't really fit the movie. this seems like, in fact, I was convinced that Jennifer Jason Leigh was going to get pushed into the incinerator, which, if memory serves, she doesn't. I was like, as I watched the incinerator, like every time I saw it, I was like, oh, why are they putting it? I guess they had to put the incinerator so that she could get pushed into the incinerator at the end. And it's just like this constant back and forth of like rejecting it and then accepting it on the grounds that, well, we're going to get to see Jen getting pushed into it. And then I don't think that actually happens. The killing and the physical peril and all that in this movie is quite, as you said, with the dog lying on the street, with the gay guy upstairs who is sort of waking up from his like kind of almost being assumedly beaten to death, but he's not quite dead. There's some nice little things in this movie that show that she isn't the Terminator, but she's also unscrupulous, and she'll kind of, yeah. But then for every one of those, I suppose you got like a high heel murder. So cheesy mixed with more realistic elements, but it was one that I enjoyed.
Yeah, what is it? Is it Tchaikovsky's gun? Is that the person who said it? It's probably not. I'm probably just thinking of a. Oh, it's Chekhov's gun, isn't it? Chekhov, fucking Gorbachev. Let me go through the list of names of Russian people I know. Yeah, wasn't it Chekhov's gun or something like that? That said, if you show a gun in the first act, it better well go off in the third act. Presuming it was Chekhov. If you show an incinerator in the final act, somebody needs to get pushed into the fucking incinerator. And I thought that was going to happen as well. I mean, we did see a lot of the building as well. This is where the laundry room is. It felt like a very old building. Maybe they just burned shit before with chimneys. Maybe it was a massive mansion. I don't know. But regarding the erotica, yes, I didn't find it erotica either. But maybe all you needed to do was be shown a pair of tits, sexual or otherwise, for it to be classed as that around the time. I don't know. And you're forgetting about the scene when Bridget Fonda, was on the chair just randomly with the ex when they met up. And they're having sex on the chair and she's naked. That scene is purely put in because, right, we need to get a sex scene so we can tap into the golden age of erotica films. The other thing is, I agree that the scene where she's tied up is good, especially when she puts up the volume and the neighbor complains. And I agree that the scene where she's typing on the internet, if that's what it was, I'm presuming it was, I also agree that has a moment of fleeting tension. There's just something about how it was put together just didn't work for me in the final moments and whatnot, or the final third of the movie. It just didn't hit right. Something was off for me. It's a bit bored by that part. So I'd say it doesn't work as a thriller for me. It does work as a psychological drama or a psychological mystery. It also works as a home invasion movie in a way. A psychological home invasion movie. Obviously, you love home invasion movies, and it's not quite in the ilk of home invasion movies that you would maybe think of, which I can't think of absolutely any right now, but you know what I'm talking about, where someone's trying to break into your house and you have to defend your home, panic room type of thing, even Home Alone. But this is more like a low-key version of that, where you invite someone into your home and they slowly start to invade your privacy, start to invade your life. and start to invade your sense of self and your friends, your boyfriend, your social circle, your job. There's something parasitical, if that is a fucking word. If not, it is now, about the nature in which she invades the home in this. That's pretty cool. And I don't think I've seen before in this way. Certainly not in a female to female way, as we keep getting back to. And it works really well as that as well. And I was, when you said about parking the fact about the mental illness of Jennifer Jason Leigh's character to the side, I didn't really mean it like that. I meant it more along the lines of your comment of, is it exploiting mental illness? I park things like that to one side because I think anything on screen is exploiting in some way, some worse than others. In terms of what her mental illness brings to the character and brings to the role, I find really interesting. And she is played and portrayed sympathetically. And I think that's what works really well about the character. Even when she's doing the batshit crazy stuff, maybe not her fucking heel murder, but when she's doing a lot of the things, it's built around, I'm protecting you, I'm looking out for you, nobody loves me, I don't want to be alone. It's constantly running counteractive to the sinister acts she's actually doing. And that really makes the character. And apparently Bridget Fonda had a choice between which character to play, and she thought her role was the harder role, but I guess it's the less flashy of roles. But I think what Jennifer Jason Leigh has to do is the harder role, and that is making you sympathetic towards this character who's does pretty heinous things, but there is something likable about the character, and there is something, a sadness to the character that is brought about by the portrayal of her mental illness that really makes it much more complicated feelings wise than you would think. And in that aspect, I think it really does add something to it. And I think you could even point to the moment where it happens. There's a distinct plotting in the movie that does point to something that might lead to a psychological break. And that when she moves in to begin with, she says to the Bridget Fonda character, oh, you're definitely finished with him, right? Because I really don't want to have to move in here and settle in and then have to leave. And you see it happening all the time. And then when they get back together, immediately she starts to switch, and that's the downfall. And you feel like there is a turning point where something breaks in her. And because it feels like something breaks in her, instead of she was gradually going to become this anyway, that adds another layer to the performance, and it adds another layer to the movie itself, because I felt sorry for her at that stage as well, because it does suck when you move into a place and someone tells you one thing and does another thing. So yeah, it is quite complicated. It's like that movie The Gift, where we feel sorry for Gordo up to a point, and who is it? Jason. Oh, who's that guy from Arrested Development? I want to say Jason Schwartzman. No, it isn't Jason Schwartzman. Jason Bateman. He's portrayed as the asshole. It doesn't quite go that way in this. It's actually two likable characters up to a point. which again makes it more interesting because there's not a clear protagonist and an antagonist from a character perspective for a long time in this movie. There is from the point of view of how this movie is meant to work, we accept that as the genre it's in. But from a character point of view, maybe up until the sexual assault of the guy and the heel murder, then that's when she's totally lost me. Because it even feels like she beats the fuck out of the neighbor impulsively in anger. And like you said, she doesn't kill him. And the other thing is, which I meant to mention, you talk about Stephen Tobolowsky. It is nice to see his goofiness have a little bit more edge to it. That kind of nice guy, or someone who sees himself as a nice guy who's really capable of doing some heinous things. When he tries to sexual assault Bridget Fonda. And how strange is it to have him inserted in the final act, where it's not to say that he does something heroic, because even when he's doing it, he's not really doing it heroically. But how weird is it to have a guy who's an attempted rapist go to the apartment, smash the antagonist against the fucking wall, and then start to free Bridget Fonda. Now, they throw in a line that they give him where he says, "Oh, I got rid of the bitch," or it's not quite that, but it's something that allows it to seem less heroic, but he is trying to free her. And what a strange insertion in that moment, that he actually gets to do something half way to heroic. I don't know, it's certainly not presented very heroically, but if you go by his actions, and obviously he's there to get killed and get his comeuppance, but the fact that they allow him to go a little bit further and start freeing Bridget Fonda was an interesting way of going about things. But yeah, a lot to talk about, a lot to digest. But ultimately, we're a ways away in terms of how much we liked it. That's not to say I didn't think it was decent, though.
Yeah, very interesting point there about Tobolowsky sort of coming in as the almost muscle-bound hero. A lot of shots, like, feels like low-angle shots of him, like, running in and muscling open the door and everything. Yeah, you definitely wouldn't have that kind of a character story in a movie nowadays. But on Tchaikovsky's gun, the incinerator, yeah, I was wondering if I'd misremembered that there is a incinerator kill at the end. In fact, I wonder if there is a deleted scene, alternative ending, where she gets thrown into the incinerator and it was like too gory for the censors, or just looked really shit. I mean, it'd be a hard scene to pull off, but it certainly feels like the movie is leading up to it, and we never get that. Whether or not this is a home invasion movie, I know I get the distinction. Certainly films like Inside are what I would think of as more classical home invasion movies, The Purge, things like that. Whenever I see people online discussing home invasion movies, there's two ways you can go. They can go what I think of as home invasion movies, where it's like people inside the house, people outside the house. People inside the house are trying to protect themselves. People outside the house trying to get in the house and kill those people. And then there's another type of home invasion movie, which is like this, where, or The Guest or something like that, where this is a person, like the stepfather. It's like, this is a threat, a baddie, and they've found their way into your house, but socially, whether via relationship or whatever it might be. And to me, that's not a home invasion movie. In fact, as you were describing it there, I sort of coined the phrase, although maybe others have done so in the past, but in my head I was thinking, this is kind of like a life invasion movie. And I would say The Gift is definitely another example of that, where it's like, you're just going about your life, you're a regular person, random person on the street, just average everyday person, and you let this random person into your life, and then you regret it. like a comedic version be What About Bob? And, you know, these films where it's just like, now you're stuck with this person. They're almost like a curse, like you said, like a parasite. It's sort of like a sister genre of the home invasion movie, but I'm a little protective of the parameters of home invasion because it's my favorite genre of horror. But yeah, of course, if you know, without that pedantry, you could certainly say it's a home invasion movie. It's just like a different thing that it's going for than the classic home invasion. I think I wasn't like, I didn't put it very well before when I said that, like, that when I was describing that mental health stuff, like, I know that you like all that side of it, the way that mental health is presented in this. The question of whether it's exploitative or not, I think, does come up for me a little bit more than it seems to come up for you. And I think that it would come up for other people more. Like, there's probably people out there who would watch this film, they get about halfway through and they'd be like, you know what, I just done watching movies where someone's suffering mentally and therefore they're a threat to us, right? There's people out there who just, this type of stuff leaves a bad taste in their mouth, or they just can't stomach it. I'm not like that. Like, I can adore this film, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Psycho, like many, many movies that I've loved over the years that present someone struggling with mental health as a threat. The Shining, I mean, the list goes on. And in fact, I think it would be challenging to be a horror fan if you didn't have an appetite for that. And my favorite type of horror is when there's a human threat. But at the same time, I do sometimes think, even though I can appreciate this, and even though I can think this is like a really entertaining and fun movie, there is something to, I think, about the people who are struggling with similar issues as this girl. Like, maybe not the twin died and kind of more cinematic bent to it, but most of what we see Jennifer Jason Leigh grapple with in this movie before she starts murdering people is like very, very, very relatable stuff for a great many people. And not just relatable, but stuff that kind of destroys people's lives. And I'm just imagining one of those people getting to this movie, like, it, you know, thrown on a flick on TV, and they're just like, God, man, the world really doesn't like me, like, doesn't, like, thinks of me as a threat and stuff. So it could be mental health, it could be a minority group that's kind of the fear of that entity is exploited in the movie. And I like a lot of these movies. I think they're great movies. I think that exploiting fears that exist within society is something that has created a lot of great cinema. And I'm absolutely not here saying stop now. We've learned the error of our ways. Let's stop doing this. That's not the position I'm taking. But it comes into my head. I often will watch a movie and I'm thinking, like, is it, like, would it, like, she just needs help. She just needs, like, understanding and compassion. Anyway, it's also, the movie kind of gives you plenty of outs, and it doesn't make you get to the end of the movie going like, shit, she was just such a nice person, because obviously she ultimately goes on to kill people and stuff, and it's not a overly realistic portrayal by the end of it. But I think just Jason Leigh, kind of like you said with The Gift, where by the end of that movie you're very much on the side of Gordo. In this case, Bridget Fonda seems like a lovely person, so you're not on Jen's side, but, you know, she humanizes the monster, quote unquote, a lot. It's interesting that Fonda was offered either part and decided that the lead part was the more challenging or the more rewarding. After I watched it, like, I thought, yeah, like you said, Jen's character is the more showy part. It's the one where you have the most opportunity to really showcase your acting skills. And when I get to the end of this movie, I'm like, I need more Jennifer Jason Leigh in my life. I mean, I've certainly enjoyed her in the handful of movies, Fast Times, Richmond High, The Hateful Eight, can't really think of much else that I've seen her in, but you know, she's definitely bumped up in my estimation in this movie. Whereas Bridget Fonda, I've always thought she's fine. I've never thought anything negative about her acting capabilities, but she's just never really stood out to me much. I think Singles she's in, if I'm not mistaken, or am I thinking of a different Gen X iconic movie? And she plays this kind of like young, innocent in the world, just innocently trying to navigate the world really well. And I think she's almost kind of like, how would I put it? She the type of character that she plays is, sorry, got cut off there. On the subject of Bridget Fonda and like whether she's got the more or less challenging part, I think coming away from the film, you've got this like sledgehammer performance from Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Bridget Fonda is like, you could sort of like, especially by the contrast between the two performances, you could kind of come away going, and Bridget Fonda's just like inserts young attractive female actress. Like there's really not much for her to do. And maybe on an acting level, there might not be a huge amount, although I think there is a fair bit. I think she's quite magnetic, and everything she has to do in the film, however little or that might be, she navigates really well. But the other thing that I think has to be taken into consideration is that she's clearly got the X factor. I mean, in the handful of performances I've seen from her, she's incredibly charismatic. And, you know, just like you need to be interested in watching both of these people throughout the movie. It'd be interesting to try and hunt down whatever performance Fonda has that's the most similar to Jennifer Jason Leigh's character, to see, had she made that choice, if she would be in any way competent in executing it. But this, certainly based off the strength of Singles, this performance is pretty in line with kind of what I'd expect her forte to be. And yeah, like you said, that there is that turning point where maybe Jennifer Jason Leigh has the best of intentions. She says to Bridget Fonda, he's not going to move back in. Like, you guys aren't going to get back together again, right? And obviously, as an audience member who's seen like one movie before, you know for damn certain that that is going to happen. But yeah, she seems to be coming with the best of intentions, and then this thing happens that's the catalyst, and she sort of, you know, she switches. I guess that's a familiar thing, not just in movies, but in psychology, just in people in general, where it's like, yes, there was a switch that was outside of their control that got flicked, but it's pretty unstable to like to have that kind of a outcome from such a minor switch. Although, like you said, it is pretty disrupted. You just moved into a new place, you've made this best friend, and then all of that seems to be crumbling before your eyes. So yeah, as you said, a lot to chew over. And yeah, classic flick. I just love the vibes. I love the setting. I love it's young people in New York in the early 90s, and they're doing their thing, and she's trying to make a go of it. Like, I like when I watch a thriller or horror or something like this, and I already like the world, the setting, the characters before the shit hits the fan, you know? Like, you're watching The Mist by Frank Darabont, and it's like, I like where they're living down by the lake, and the bants that they have when they go down the grocery store and stuff. It's like, I'm already in, and we haven't even got to the movie yet. That's a good vibes. You might hear my little baby son here. I'm carrying him around as I speak. But yeah, interesting. Another good hidden gem, not really a hidden gem. I've been hearing about it my whole life, but I could easily not have watched it if I hadn't just been sort of looking for something that I thought would be pretty, pretty frictionless on a tired, what was it, Monday evening or something.
Yeah, I think you did coin Life Invasion movie. Just had a look there. That'll be the birth of what we call this type of thing from now on. I like it. Um, just to obviously we've pretty much talked it today anyway, but regarding the comment that like you can't help but have a thought in your head if somebody is watching it that has a mental illness or a slight like things that are similar. I mean, man, if I watch movies with that in mind, and obviously it's just a thought, it's not your main thought, and you explained that. If I watch these type of movies with that in mind, even the slightest, it would like almost corrupt my viewing. For me, it's like, yeah, you want to take something that's rooted in a small bit of reality and heighten that up and crank that up. That's really interesting to me. But anyway, funny. I think our last 4 or 5 movies we've watched, Red Rock West, Sneakers, there's got to be some more, but I think the last 5 or 6 movies have been 90s movies. And 90s movies is a genre of movies that we've covered extensively, not in the show, I mean, but in our lifetime. So to get a good run of decent to very good movies in the last while that happened to be 90s of all places, which we've fucking mined the hell out of in our time. It's pretty crazy that you can still find off the beaten track movies and movies that you maybe have heard about that you finally got to that are still delivering in the 90s. Like, that's great. But anyway, yeah, just had a look at Jennifer Jason Leigh performance there. Centers around a strike. Last exit to Brooklyn, I think. Maybe that's not what it's called. I just looked at it 5 minutes ago. Oh yeah, and just another thing that I read there a minute ago. Just it's pretty much a tidbit, but I found it really fucking cool. So in the scene where Jennifer Jason Leigh impersonates Bridget Fonda's character to get into the bed with her boyfriend, Jennifer Jason Leigh's makeup wasn't ready. So apparently they used Bridget Fonda to double as Jennifer Jason Leigh, who is meant to double as her character for the first half of that scene in the bedroom in the hotel. That's pretty fucking cool. But yeah, anyway, just probably the only time I'll ever get to tell you that fact. So let's just leave it there.
Yeah, I'm glad you capitalized on your only ever opportunity to give me that fact. I actually thought, like, as they were clearly showing her in shadow and, like, you know, in the background, out of focus, kind of far away, a lot of the time I was like, geez, she really looks like Bridget Fonda. And I thought, you know, fantastic casting job getting them to be able to look so similar. So it's interesting that as in some of those shots, perhaps it was actually Bridget Fonda. Yeah, 90s, man. Like, obviously we've seen so many. I think like Fisher King also included, like, a lot of these movies we were watching are not just 90s, they're like 1990 to 1992 specifically. But it just goes to show you that no matter how deeply you mine a era or a genre or a nationality or whatever it might be, it's just never ending. There's just so many good films out there, so many films worth watching. So yeah, definitely enjoying getting my 90s fix lately with these flicks.
Hey man, you reminded me of something else there that I totally forgot about. And you sent me that article by was it Scott Tobias? about the single white female. I can't actually read it because it's behind the paywall, but it did remind me of something that I forgot to mention. We've talked about how the portrayal of Jennifer Jason Leigh makes the character sympathetic. But one thing I really found interesting was in what we know about her and how that leads to her maybe pathology. It's I had a movie in the back of my mind there and I couldn't quite think of it, but turns out it's The Talented Mr. Ripley. But in this, if you pick the pieces and clues of her story, she had a twin that died at 9 years old. Because we know psychological horror, we presume she killed her, but obviously that's just a presumption. It's never revealed and there's not a hint at that other than we just get that feeling from these type of movies. But in reality, she probably didn't kill her. She's probably psychologically damaged because her twin has died. And then she said that she's always felt something is missing from her because part of her died. And then this leads into her basically having no identity and almost losing her identity, or at least half her identity, since she feels half of her as missing. And then this ties into her feeling like she has a sister, or maybe more than a sister, actually part of herself that is lost, that she finds in the character of Bridget Fonda. And then obviously that quote, which is mentioned in the article that you sent me, when Jennifer Jason Leigh first looks like Bridget Fonda and says, "I like me like this." And it's almost her learning to love herself, but it's really fucked up because she's loving herself by creating an identity based on another person. And that's really interesting. And if you remember one of the final scenes, which I totally forgot about it as well, when Bridget Fonda has a knife to her throat, she kisses Jennifer Jason Leigh. And up until that point, you couldn't really say that it was sexual in nature. It was more a number of other things like coveting their life, admiration gone too far, clinginess. But in that scene where Bridget Fonda kisses her, it almost, well, first of all, it stops Jennifer Jason Leigh from killing Bridget Fonda. But also, if you go into the pathology and try and analyze the character, it almost is like she's loving herself and comforting herself and finally feeling whole as a person, even though she's managed to do it by creating and mirroring someone else's identity to find a new identity for herself, and then merging of two people, making herself whole. That's a fucking crazy layer to it as well. Like, we didn't even talk about that. But yeah, that's just another thought that came into my head. So a lot of stuff in this movie. A lot of stuff.
Yeah, I think you've just very well articulated what I was sort of trying to express about like the mental health issues and why that sort of sticks in the back of my throat a little bit. It's not like, again, I can enjoy this movie wholeheartedly, but it certainly prompts within me that thinking and considering the real world like burden that people similar to Jennifer Jason Leigh's character, or at least pre-murdering Jennifer Jason Leigh's character, are battling. And I think that's, you know, I don't know about you, but for me, film very often evokes considering real world challenges. Certainly the films of Ken Loach, I would say, have that element to them. This is a thriller, no doubt. It is intended as escapism, but I think the performance by Jennifer Jason Leigh, combined with certainly script elements, but the performance, there's such a human, fantastic performance, really gets you on side. Like they always say, if you're playing a villain, you got to be committed to the idea that you are the hero of the movie. And she takes this to the nth degree here. I end up very sympathetic to her because, like you said, she's lost. She's missing something profound within her that would anchor her, and she finds it in emulating Bridget Fonda and seeking validation from Bridget Fonda. And that kiss scene that you mentioned, which is fantastic because it's clearly, they're clearly trying to play with the sort of sexy, erotic, lesbian kind of trope within this movie. But because the actors have done such a good job, it makes that kiss completely unsexual, and it's more just like Bridget Fonda, or at least this is how it appears to Jennifer Jason Leigh. It's Bridget Fonda saying, I accept you, I admire you, I want you in my life. And that's the messaging. I don't think Jennifer Jason Leigh's character is supposed to be turned on there, or certainly that's not what we get with these actresses like delivering these characters. So yeah, you could say in many, many, many respects, the film has been set up by producers, director, like everyone involved, to be a very base, exploitative, shallow, erotic thriller. And then they just made the mistake of hiring two very good actresses, or certainly very good for these parts, who wrestle that intention away from the film and end up delivering like a very human picture. But maybe because it's got the foundation of a sort of Hitchcockian thriller, for me, it just ends up still being really thrilling on those grounds. But yeah, anyway, I'm surprised how much conversation we've got out of this movie, especially given that you weren't like crazy about it. But I think it's interesting. I've often heard about this movie. It's the type of movie that you would have seen like in the video store, back in the day, like sort of does what it says on the tin type movie. So it's surprising now that it's just prompted so much conversation, especially when, you could often watch like an art house movie or something that's like, you'd think would be more thematically rich and have more to chew over and dissect, and it ends up yielding quite a brief conversation. So it's always nice when a film can work on those two levels of being pure fun, raw, sort of carnal escapism, and then also making you go, well, what did she really want, and what was really in her heart and her mind? And yeah, there's a lot here, and I think I want to know. A part of me wants to dig a little deeper into the writer and director, see what else is out there. But part of me just thinks that this might have been that perfect storm where you just, because of the casting, because of all the elements kind of coming together, you ended up getting something that was so much more than the sum of its parts. And any alley that you explore that, trails off away from this movie, be it the filmography of the writer or whatever, is just not gonna quite be as rich as this.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.